beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Kook Audio podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Kook Audio and Kook Archives, doing our bit to help preserve the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths cross his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. So today we have a guest, Dor Ben Amotz. He got a hold of me a while back about a course he's teaching at Bennington College on the fundamentals of Buddhism and meditation. Bennington College is located in Bennington, Vermont. And he's from Indiana. And that's where I talked to him for this podcast. Anyway, he got a hold of me before the course, and we communicated about that a little. And he wanted to use, he was into the Shunryu Suzuki lineage, and wanted to use certain materials. And when it was through, he sent us a sort of the syllabus, the course materials. It's pretty extensive, and it's really good. And we are posting it on kook.com. I don't know exactly where it'll be. It'll be a PDF that you can open. And I'll just put a link to it on the blog, so you can go to the daily posts and see the notice, the post about this podcast, and it will give where it is there. And I'll put it in the metadata too, but I'm recording this a week before. So, and if you're running into this years later, just go to kook.com and search for Dor Ben Amotz, DorBenAmotz. He's got an interesting story, how he got into Buddhism and teaching Buddhism. He's basically a science teacher. That's interesting stuff, too. I wouldn't have minded spending some time talking about that, but we talked long enough about the other stuff. And he's been practicing at Gringo some. He set sessions with Shohaku Okamura. At Gringo, even though he's from Indiana and that's where Shohaku is, his first session was with Shohaku at Green Gulch. Anyway, it's interesting things about to say about teaching and about teaching the class and about the students. I really enjoyed it. So, look, here we go. Let's listen to what Dor has to say. Good day to you, sir, Mr. Dor Ben Amotz. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, that's exactly right. And good to see you, David.
Yeah. So, are you in Indiana?
I'm in Indiana currently, but I just got back from Vermont, where I spent 4 months. I was teaching at Bennington College, which is my alma mater. I don't know how much of my life story I need to tell you to fill in, but I was at college in Bennington, Vermont, and then I've been a professor in Indiana for 35 years in science, physical chemistry, but I'm retired now. And I was teaching voluntarily at Bennington College. I was teaching two classes. One was a science class called Energy, Entropy, and Quantization, which is sort of my bread and butter area. I won't go into all that. But then the other class...
Say the name of that. Say that name again.
Yeah, the first class was called Energy, Entropy, and Quantization.
And what's that last word? What's that last word?
Quantization. It's like quantum mechanics, quantum things.
Uh-huh. Huh.
And it's really about what makes the whole universe tick and what makes everything go, just like Buddhism is. It's a strange thing, but it's from the scientific perspective. What makes everything go is energy and entropy, usually in a tug of war. And quantization, nothing would be what it is. I mean, none of this would exist without quantum phenomena. So they're all just fascinating topics, and they really drive how the world works. And I guess I'd say I've always been interested in how the world works. And Buddhism, my interest in Buddhism is really exactly the same. It's just mysterious how those two things are connected. I mean, I still don't know. And in some ways, I chose to teach this class on Buddhism. I called the class Fundamentals of Buddhism and Meditation.
Mm.
And I've been doing this stuff for years and years too, probably close to 50 years on and off, starting really when I was a student at Bennington College in Vermont. And I took a class. I probably was interested in some of this stuff before then, even, but I took a class called uh, A Religious Experience by a guy named Claude Fredericks, who was a Buddhist.
Mm.
And he had us read all kinds of interesting things, including, the Dhammapada,
Mm.
basic Buddhism, there was one book he assigned that was a Zen book. That was a Wang Po.
Oh, yeah.
It's
It's great.
Wang
John
Po, beautiful
Blofield.
book, and I've since learned I've had this on my shelf for 50 years, and I keep revisiting it. And then I've also recently learned by reading up on it that it's one of the few, kind of like Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, in the sense that it was actually talks that he gave, Dharma talks, that were written down by one of his students who was actually, I think, a sort of an emperor or future emperor or something who studied with him and actually wrote from memory his lectures down at the time, instead of being like much later.
Mm.
So it's interesting that way, and it's got wonderful things in it that I keep revisiting. Like even in the very first section, it says something like the only difference between Buddhas and sentient beings is that sentient beings don't realize that they're Buddhas. It's something like that,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
was a very influential book for me, too, like before I came to Zen
Oh,
Center. Yeah.
really? Yeah. So, I was fascinated and confused by that book, which of course, that's a good thing. I remember thinking this is wonderful and I really want to do this, but what does that mean? How do you do this? What does doing this even mean? And it took me actually probably about 20 years after that when I finally, graduated and did different things and was a postdoc. And there's a long story there, but I became a professor at Purdue University and then was introduced to Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and Buddhism by a wonderful poet named Neil Meyer that
Hmm.
was a poet here for years and years, and he had a meditation group, a Zen meditation group, and he had sort of overlaps over the years with Katagiri and several other people that came through Purdue University, Japanese, Um, so he started his own Zen group, and the structure of it was just sitting, and then he would read a section of Zen Mind's Beginner's Mind, and we would sometimes chat a little bit about that.
Hmm.
There was a little chant that we did. I think it was before the vows, you
Yeah.
know. But we did it in the kanji form, so we didn't even know what it meant,
you you did
It's funny, but he
Shujo
said this is just to get
Muin
your voice. He said this is just to get your voice going again.
Yeah.
It was wonderful chanting it that way.
I say it every morning. Shujo Muhin
Yeah.
Seikando, Bono Mujin Seikandan, Homon Murio
Yes.
Seikangaku, Butsudo Mujo Seikanjo.
Oh man, there was many years since I've said it in the kanji, but I almost could repeat it with you. But that same group evolved to starting to say it in English. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it.
Yeah.
So that same group says that little chant now. Anyway, so this was a miraculous thing for me because when I finally started meditating, which is in the early 90s, before then I'd been reading a lot and feeling like I love this, but I don't know what to do with it and how to sort of become it. And then when I started meditating, it was very strange to me
Hmm.
because I still don't even understand why that's true. But when I started meditating, I suddenly realized, oh, that's what they're talking about.
Hmm.
Even though I can't even tell you now how the physical act of meditating and those words actually go together. I mean, I guess I can say more things about it now, but it's still a mysterious thing that
Mm.
meditating makes all those kind of spooky and interesting and mysterious words uh, meaningful, or they're connected with something real,
Mm. Yeah.
something real that we're all connected with. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that we're all running away from all the time.
Yeah.
The something real that's right here that we're all sort of seeking elsewhere. Where are you going to seek that elsewhere? But no, no, it's right here. Don't go anywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so I decided to teach. So it just came to me one day, when I was uh, setting up to teach at Bennington this for the semester, and it was the due date for submitting the syllabus information for the science class I was going to be teaching. And I was meditating in the morning and it just came to me, said, wait a minute, you need to teach a course on Buddhism and meditation, which I'd never taught. I taught for years and years, but I taught science and I was doing meditation. And I'd been in several sessions, going back to the 90s in Hokioji, Minnesota Zen Center, and then at
Oh, yeah.
Sonoma Mountain, with Bill Kwong, and it was with
Yeah.
Shahaku Okamura in Minnesota. And then most recently, 2 years ago, was it 2 years ago? No, it was a little over a year ago. I was at the Rohatsu Seishin. I was at Green Gulch for 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So, over the years, about every 15 years, I immerse myself. I forget how torturous a Seishin is, and I go do it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But so it's somehow all of that just came together, and I just felt like I want to teach a course in Buddhism and meditation. And so I submitted it unsolicited. I submitted this course proposal, and they sort of looked at me askance, and they called me back and said, I don't. I'm looking at your your CV, and I don't see anything. You haven't published any papers on Buddhism. So, yeah, you're right about that. Anyway, I ended up having sort of the idea of using my mentor in the San Francisco Zen Center these days is Zachary Smith, who's a wonderful guy who's
Mm.
my age, and I've been kind of basically corresponding regularly with him. We have a sort of a semi-regular monthly thing, and he's just been really great to know. And I said, well, maybe Zachary Smith could vouch for me. And so I gave him his contact and asked for his okay. And he said, yeah, I knew he was excited about me thinking of teaching this class. So it was all good. And anyway, so I did teach the class. And I was, I think, appropriately worried about it in a way because I'd never taught a class on Buddhism. And it was going to be nothing like teaching the things I'd been used to teaching, and I wanted very much to be helpful and useful and, you know, felt half the time like I didn't know anything and the other half like I had something that I really wanted to offer and I didn't know how to do it. But anyway, the thing is, the students, okay, so I wrote a little syllabus description of it, and the students had to sign up, and it was very immensely popular sign up. It was overbooked. I couldn't take that many students. I ended up having 21 students in the class. So they're
Mm.
in their 20s. And there's something about it was very resonant with this time right now. I mean, these students, it ended up, I didn't know what I'd be getting into with the students, but they were, I would say, remarkably way seeking in a certain way.
Mm.
They
Mm.
really wanted, they know that things are, a mess, which has been true for quite a few thousands of years, but they really feel it right now,
Yeah.
right? But they really feel the dukkha thing right now, even though they didn't know the name for that. Some of them, a few of them had had meditation experience, but most of them not. They just thought Buddhism and meditation, this sounds like something I want to do. So it was really pretty interesting having, honestly, I felt a little bit like I'm not going to overstretch this or anything, but I felt a little bit like, when Shinichiro Suzuki came to San Francisco and the timing was just right,
Mm.
in those days for him to do that amazing stuff. And the people were there ready. They were sponges ready to soak this up right in the
Yeah.
60s. And of course, it's not anything like the same. I'm not trying to overly compare, but I still felt like there was something kind of right about the timing of teaching a Buddhism class right now.
Hmm.
That this generation really, is quite seriously uh, s seeking something alternative to what they're doing now and what's not working.
Wow. That
You know,
is not something I have been hearing. So that's good to hear.
yes, I was surprised at that. I guess I wasn't surprised that they're feeling stressed and uncertain and unsatisfied. And those are all like different translations for the word dukkha. I've always been interested in that, where it's usually translated as
Right.
suffering. But
Right.
really, that's one of the meanings. But a long time ago, someone told me that a better translation from Sanskrit is unsatisfactory. Like life is unsatisfactory.
Right. Right.
There's something just not quite right about it.
Yeah. I call it
And
I can't get no satisfaction.
yeah, there you go. Unsatisfactory. That's can't get
Yeah.
no satisfaction. And then another translation I've seen is stress. So life is
Huh.
stressful, and the students really resonated with that.
Huh.
Unsatisfactory and stressful. They're like they know exactly what that to them resonates. Suffering
Yeah.
they had a little trouble with because they like everybody does, that word suffering doesn't quite hit the mark because everybody knows that they have some wonderful days and there's some beautiful things in the world, and nobody thinks of themselves, or few, some people may, but I think people don't think of themselves as just walking around suffering all the time. But
Yeah.
they all know that there's stresses. Everybody knows that we all know that there's stresses and there's unsatisfactory elements, and we want to complete the picture. It's like an incomplete picture. We feel
Yeah.
disconnected.
Well,
Dualism. I mean,
incomplete.
there's so many.
It's an incomplete is you know another way of looking at the meaning of dukkha.
Right, exactly. All those things are so much about the same thing. The whole no self. It's like no self is another concept they had a lot of trouble with. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but what I first learned when I got into this class is, but when I first getting a little ahead of myself, no pun intended. Anyway, but when I first got into the class, I was struck by how they were looking for something, and a lot of it they had ideas about what meditation was and what Buddhism. Somehow that attracted them, so they had some preconceived notions about this. And it was quickly clear that the main thing I had to do is get them to just throw away all those preconceived notions, that they were not going to be very helpful. Whatever they thought Buddhism was or whatever they thought meditation is, it's totally different. Not sometimes not entirely different, but they have to let go of all those preconceptions.
Yeah.
And so that would, and so it was that sort of challenge, is just getting them to just relax and just be. They had all kinds of ideas about what they should be doing when they're meditating. The same problems we all have when we first start meditating. It's like, I'm sitting here. What do I do with my mind? What do I do with my body? What do I do with my aching knees?
Yeah.
What's going on here? I'm clearly not doing this right. You know, I'm
That's
clearly
right.
not doing this right. And I say, no, 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 you're doing it exactly right. Just don't worry about it. Don't beat yourself up so much.
Yeah.
You're fine. Just let those thoughts come and go. Don't fight with them. So I tried various kind of images on them that have kind of been helpful to me, like sitting outdoors somewhere, and you're just sitting quietly and you see little squirrels or birds come across your field of view, and you can interact with them in various ways. You could say, get out of my way. I'm trying to meditate. Stop bothering me. Or you can have a little bag of seeds and you can say, come over here and eat out of my hand. Let's play, right? Say, but really the best thing to do is just to sit there and let them come and let them go. So that was always a helpful image to me about how to deal with thoughts. Is just let them come and let them go like some wonderful creatures that you're blessed to be observing. But let them go. Don't try to wrestle with them. Don't try to drive them away. Don't try to, befriend them and get them all engaged or get engaged with them. Just watch, let them be. Anyway, so that's sort of I had them write every week in this class. Every week, I gave them a little bit of a prompt, like I gave them something to read, a section from Sonia Suzuki or two, or some other things to read. And then I'd say, write something. And at first, I realized when I got some of the first writings back every week, I said just a paragraph, it doesn't have to be long. Some of them were a little bit book reports. I said, I don't want a book report. I want you to just say what comes up for you when you read this. Like, what does it make you think, or what's confusing about it? What do you not understand, or what's
Yeah.
going on?
Yeah.
And that was helpful, and it was helpful for me. So this is the amazing thing, which is no surprise really. But you know, I learned a tremendous amount from this Buddhism and got a tremendous amount out of teaching this Buddhism class, right? I learned from what they were going through. Oh, that's where they are now. I kind of remember that, or maybe their version is a little different than because of the current era that they're living in. A lot of them were very idealistic and very concerned about, fixing the world, and how in the world is sitting somewhere going to help fix anything, that kind of issue, right?
Hmm.
So, you know, and of course I gave them, different answers in whatever best way I could, but they weren't really answers and they never were very satisfied. Well, it's like full of contradictions. And there was one, I mean, I tell them things like that. What occurred to me one time is that, a Tibetan Buddhist sitting in a cave somewhere, in a cave and meditating for their whole life, which there are people apparently that do basically meditate most of their whole life. They're in a cave. You think, well, what in the world does that do to anything? But I know that there are people like that that do this. And therefore, my view of what it means to be human is greatly expanded just
Mm.
because I know that there's such a thing as somebody that sits and meditates all day in a cave.
Mm.
You know, it's weird that I don't even know this person, but they have influenced me. If I grew in a world where there was nothing like that, I
Yeah.
would be greatly diminished. You
Mm.
know, we would all be greatly diminished if we didn't have the knowledge of people doing things like that.
Yeah.
So,
Bob
wow,
Thurman. Bob
you know,
Thurman thinks that. Bob Thurman says that like monks meditating in monasteries keep the world more sane.
yeah. And, in some ways, I entirely believe it. In other ways, it sounds kind of absurd, and they're both sort of true.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Another thing I told them though is much more practical. And actually, this I got out of your book. Well, it's very connected with what I got out of, Crooked Cucumber, which was a great inspiration to me, David. I don't read books twice ever, but I read your book twice. It's just somehow I want to read it again. It was wonderful learning experience on so many levels, about Japan and pre-World War II and Buddhism and the way that you've integrated his teachings into it. It's just amazing. But I
Hmm.
picked out for the class, I thought, what do they need to see, So I found these little quotes that were from your book that are buried in there. You'll probably recognize. I got to read one of these to you because this is how I introduced like Zazen. Is Mitsu? Am I pronouncing her name correctly?
Yeah.
His future wife.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a part in there where I'm quoting from your book, from Crooked Cucumber.
Yeah.
She asks, it's at the time after he hired her to teach in the kindergarten, the
Right.
Buddhist kindergarten that was being kind of brought up after the war. And, they were trying to bring this kindergarten back online and they needed a principal and the old person that was doing it was not no longer capable. And he heard about Mitsu and he felt strongly that she would be good to do it for whatever reason, even though she wasn't Buddhist, by her own description, she was not a Buddhist. And she was kind of confused by why he wanted her to do this. But eventually he somehow convinced her. I mean, you know the story because it's in your book. It's a wonderful story. But
Mm.
then at some point after she's already teaching in the kindergarten, she comes to him and she says, "Could you please tell me what is gained from Zazen? I don't want to do it for no reason." You know,
Mm.
and Shunryu Suzuki says this. He says, "The practice of Zazen makes you capable of dealing with the situation in the best way on the spot."
Mm.
you know? And so I told the students that like early on, I said, this is what you need to keep in your, you know what I mean? It's like, just do this. How does it
Uh-huh.
help with that? It's mysterious, but just do this, you know?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And then I told them this story about how I have sat over the years, like on and off. I've had times of sitting more intensely and going to sessions, and then times where I take time off, you know. And I sometimes honestly would, you know, I feel like it's good when I'm meditating more, and I've been doing it a lot more seriously for the past few years every day. But um, I kind of could tell that it was good. But my wife, Stephanie, she definitely could tell when I,
Huh.
you know, when I tell people, I don't know if meditation really does anything to me or not. And she said, oh, no, it does. It does a lot. You're completely different, you know, when you meditate more regularly
Hmm.
because of exactly what Shunryu Suzuki said. You can deal with things more directly on the spot when they come up much better. You know, when things, you know, problems come up, which they do all the time. When I'm meditating more, it's like, oh, there's a problem. Let's figure out what to do. You know,
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
all. Just you got to deal with it. You know, it's not all about the past and all the reasons why this shouldn't have happened or all the bad things that are gonna come from it. No, 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 no. Just none of that matters, right? Just
Yeah.
deal with it. It's a thought. It's like a thought coming up. It's not your enemy. It's just a thing that's coming up, and it's unpleasant to some extent, but not really, because in some ways it's a challenge that we're here to meet challenges, or what else would we be doing?
Yeah. Hey, with your
Yeah.
class, do you have some meditation?
Yes, always meditation in the class.
Yeah.
So,
How
when I
long?
had
How do you
class
do it?
myself, okay, that was a good question. So I started out being very, just figuring out better not dive into it too deep to start with. I said 5 minutes. So we started out with 5 minute meditation. I told them just barely anything about it, just
Yeah.
sit. I said it's very important to get your back in the right position so that you can comfortably, I was more on posture, and so that you can sit and let gravity basically hold you up so you're not like causing great pains in your muscles and you just feel stable like a mountain. So yeah, I told them some little things like this. But we meditated for 5 minutes, then I'd increase it. It was a weekly class, so we meet
Yeah.
for 2 hours every week. So every
Mm-hmm.
week I increased it a little bit, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Then I wanted to increase it more. And I was not really sure if the students were ready to go to half hour or whatever. So I decided to do this thing of, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come in 15 minutes early. The class was at 8 in the morning, which, by the way, was a great testament to these students' seriousness because in this school, in college, probably like all colleges, they're night people. They are not about morning classes. It's very hard for them to get up and be ready at 8 in the morning. This is the earliest classes that they have there. And
Mm.
so, but my class was 8 in the morning. It was kind of like the only time slot, whatever. It was early, and I liked the fact that it was early. So I came in even earlier, at quarter to 8, and said, anybody's welcome to join me for 15 minutes, and then I'll continue meditating for another 15 minutes. So you can join anytime you want, and you can be as shorter or longer.
Yeah.
You can be the whole half hour, or you can be just coming in at 15, right when the class is supposed to start, and meditate for 15 minutes. So we did that for a while, and only one student actually came regularly at the early with me. And then it was very funny and kind of wacky because students would be straggling in. It was a very strange way to meditate where, half the time people are straggling in.
Yeah.
And I found that to be an interesting challenge. Okay, all these little gophers and birds and trees and birds, and things are coming into my field of view, and it's a meditation experience. It's okay. Not quite as bad as the time we were meditating in our group in Indiana, and there was somebody suddenly started after we start meditating, they start drilling in the walls, like the loudest kind of drilling you can ever imagine. And we're in the middle of a 40-minute meditation, and it went on for the whole time. You know, it's like,
Uh.
okay.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, but then after a while, in the middle of the semester, I did this for about half the semester. Then they have this feedback time. They have this interesting thing where they meet on their own and they give me feedback about the class. So one of the feedbacks they gave me was that they really liked being there in the beginning of the meditation when I rang the bell and we all sat together quietly, and they didn't like this straggling in business. So I realized I better do it a little differently. So I still came in early and meditated for 15 minutes, and then the class started, and we talked a little bit, and then we'd meditate in the class for another 15 minutes.
Yeah.
In the middle of this 2 hour class, when there was a natural break, I said, "Okay, should we meditate now?" Good. And they'd like, it was always there was always a nice natural point to say, "Okay, let's meditate." So we would. And then at some point, I brought up Kenyan walking meditation, and they were like, "Oh yeah, okay, can we do that?" Yeah. And I thought we'd do it in the class, but the time we were doing it was right at the peak of foliage in Vermont. Vermont has this beautiful foliage, and it turned out the absolute peak of it was this day. And I was like, "Yeah, we got to meditate in class, And the students were saying, "Can't we go outside? It's so beautiful outside." I said, it's going to take up too much time. I was kind of like, in my mind, I was just balking. And then another student said, "Let's go outside." I said, "Okay, you really want to go outside?" "Yes." "Okay, let's go outside." So we went outside and we walked around this beautiful, burning, on fire looking maple tree. And it was wonderful. So we did. And I said, "So you want to keep doing this walking meditation outside every week? And even if it gets cold and snowing and stuff?" And said, "Yes, we do." So from then on, we meditate in the class, and then we did a little Kenyan, and then we come back to the class. Usually there wasn't much time left after that. It was towards the end. So yeah, they meditated, and I didn't tell them. I forget if I even ever suggested that it might be interesting if they meditated more than just in class. But I was very, very low key about that. I was like, I really felt like it's important not to
Yeah.
get, all like, you should meditate every day. It's like if they want to, they'll do it. I don't even know how many did, but from the writings, I gather that some of them did meditate more often, maybe every day. I just didn't want to micromanage that. Let them find it on their own. That's how I did. I meditated sometimes. There was a lot of my career of meditating where more or less was once a week meeting with this group. And it was helpful. And then I'd go to sessions once in a while. And then there were periods where I'd meditate every day. And now I've been doing it every day for several years. And I'm very happy to be doing it, but I'm kind of ready to do it. It's like, anyway, so I was very kind of just let the thing evolve in the way that it wants to evolve. And it kind of did. That class
Mm.
was a wonderful class
Mm.
for me and for them. Like after we meditate, I do a little gasho and just say thank you. You know, I said this is kind of traditional. We just when we finish meditating, we just bow to each other. We say thank you, and it got to the point where kind of spontaneously, either then or at the end of the class, we just all thank each other. I say thank you for this class. I kept stressing how much this class was wonderful for me. I wouldn't overstress it, but you know what? I just make it clear to them. I love this class. I remember even saying one point in the class, I said, "I love this class."
Mm.
And they were kind of like, "We love this class too, you know?
Mm.
So it was just kind of great. We got to be a refuge for each other.
Yeah. Well, that's really something. Hey, I'd like you to describe your course first. The what you sent me. What do you call that? A syllabus?
Yeah,
Outline of the course. Why don't you
yeah,
describe it? But there was a lot of in
yeah,
in the Chunyu Suzuki lineage, as in my
yeah,
beginner's mind. Uh, and why don't you go over that? Just and it's going to be
yeah.
posted. It's not Peter Ford will post it. He's
Oh, okay.
running Cuke.com now. While I'm getting a book called Tassara Stories. Uh, it's coming out in September, and I'm sort of involved with that now. Uh, and but anyway, it's really neat, and it's going to be posted on Cuke.com, but it isn't yet. But I think by the time the It might be posted by the time this podcast is posted. So, yeah, why don't you
Oh,
tell
okay.
about it?
Well, that's nice. I mean, thank you for offering to do that. I mean, I didn't think of that would happen, but I'm glad we were corresponding, and it's wonderful that you'll put it on Cute.com, which I'm so fond of Cute.com. I keep going back to that as a resource. I quoted stuff from there often, like your daily things. I would quote them, and a lot of stuff from Cute.com ended up sort of, shaping this course. But it started out, the thing is just, two textbooks really, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and this book called What the Buddha Taught from the 1950s by
Oh,
Walpola
yeah.
Rahula, who was,
Oh, yeah.
a monk for all his life as a kid. He was a monk in India. So, and so those were the main texts, and I'd assign things from there. But I also ended up just finding stuff, serendipitously finding stuff that I thought would be cool, sometimes instigated by students, but maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. So, like, there were various optional books, including books like Being Nobody, Going Nowhere by Ayakima, you know, and your book, Crooked Cucumber, is like optional reading. I didn't assign that they had to read Crooked Cucumber, but I kept telling them how wonderful it is. And, Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet, I added Thich Nhat Hanh's book because I thought they would really resonate. And I think I was right, but I don't know how many of them actually went and read these alternate books, but they're interested in saving the planet.
Yeah.
And there ended up being a lot of online stuff. But, so I would, I also have a page full of links that are like, Shunryu Suzuki in person. That was wonderful to do. And I would actually show like the Re and G talk, meditation instructions, the 3-minute thing that's just him. As oh my goodness, it's so wonderful to see him, not just read him, right? And just because there's so much I mean, and I wish I had known him in person, but just even that little video clip, you get this sort of radiance of just his personality of I don't know, like every Buddhist teacher or whatever, they're always smiling, right? So that's not a big deal. But when you see Shunryu Suzuki smiling, it's like he's just joyously happy to be here, and this is amazing fun. And that
Uh,
just comes through in this way that is rare. And it's
Now
kind of like the people.
you mentioned a video clip. All the film and video is on shunyusuzuki.com. More than a few minutes.
Yes,
Uh,
right.
and all right, just wanted to
Good.
make
I'm glad you mentioned that.
yeah.
And it's all linkable through Cuke.com. You can find all that stuff.
Yeah, just go to shunyusuzuki.com and go to the film section, and there's
Yeah.
even some more recent uh, stuff that doesn't have him.
Yes. And I think I found a lot of those things like Study Yourself, Shunryu Suzuki. It's a compilation of his talks without him in person and video, but it's put together, I think, in 2023 by the Zen Center. And, other things, Branches of the Sandukai, a little longer clip of him talking. So I
Hmm.
showed some of those things, including also talks by people like at Green Gulch, like Sarah Tasker. I heard her give a wonderful Dharma talk on one of their Sunday things that's open to the public. My wife and I have been going there for years on and off to Green
Hmm.
Gulch, and
Hmm.
she gave a talk about a year or so ago called Birds and Precepts that I just thought, wow, this will be good for these students. So this is an hour-long talk, and I didn't play that in class, but I assigned it to them. Somebody even suggested, we're seeing these videos in class sometimes. Give us some assignments of videos. I said, oh, okay. So I assigned them to see this Sarah Tasker video, Birds and Precepts, which is just wonderful and has very surprising and amazing story in the middle of it about a heron and a gopher that I could try to retell, but maybe I should just, it's incredible. And it's about the precept of not killing
Oh, go on
and
and
what
tell
that
it.
means.
Go on and tell it.
Okay, okay, I'll tell my little version. So she's walking around in the garden one day. She's sort of like the head gardener, I guess, at the time. And she talks about the precepts in general, but not killing is one of the difficult ones. to figure out how to deal with. Because as a gardener, as an organic gardener, she's killing all the time. They have to deal with bugs and squirrels and things. And they always have to figure out how to manage all these life forms that want to eat all the same stuff that they're growing for everybody else.
Yeah.
So, the precept of not killing is a very difficult one to know how to just sit with, how to be with. And then one day she's walking around and there's this great blue heron suddenly about, 15 feet away from her suddenly, and they catch each other's eye, and she just stops and looks, and there's this heron there, and the, it's not flying away, and so she just looks at it, and then she realizes that it's a bit distracted. It's got its focus on something else, and then before she knows it, it swoops down and grabs this little gopher in its beak, stabs it, and it's still squirming around, and then it swoops up, flies up, and goes into a pond and dunks the gopher in the pond and drowns it. you know, and
Mm.
this all happened just right there. And it's like, but then she says, she kind of lets that sink in. And then she starts talking about how, it never even occurred to her when all this was happening that any of this was inconsistent with the precept of not killing. Like, how is that? How is that? And then she ends up connecting it to kind of like non-dual, basically. Like the gopher and the heron are one. They're one. Nobody's killing anybody. They're one thing that is transforming from one form to another, like we all do all the time.
Mm.
So somehow she ends up, that shocking example was just amazing, to illustrate the precept of not killing and what it means. And it's not like she had the answers all laid out, but she said some wonderful things and quoted Shunryu Suzuki too in her talk. I think I have these things here too. I don't know that I need to get them all, but uh, maybe I can't find them. Oh, no, there it is. Okay, so here's the quote she says. She said, "Do not kill means forget the self and realize profound connection beyond our ideas, even of connection." That's one thing she says. And then she quotes Shunryu Suzuki saying, "We say do not kill. But do not kill doesn't just mean don't kill flies and insects. Actually, if we say, here's a fly, should I kill it or not? It's too late. We always have this kind of problem, even before we see the fly. In duality, where there's me and there's the fly, the completeness, the oneness is already obscured. This is the kind of problem humans have." So she quoted that in her talk.
Mm.
And then later she quotes another one. She says, "It's impossible for anything to be killed. So the only way is to be grateful for everything that you have. That is how you keep our precepts."
Mm.
These are like, I don't even know what to say about these things, but wow, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Tough. Yeah. And so the thing went on that way. So I find these interesting. There was a student, this amazing student in the class, who actually was dealing with a lot of struggles health-wise and things that I didn't fully understand, but she told me some things that were quite horrendous, and I don't want to divulge her personal things, but um, she was an amazing student, just very wise, and she introduced me to Bell Hooks.
Ah.
Bell Hooks. And said she loves bell hooks. And then I started looking up. I'd heard of her vaguely, but I didn't really know about bell hooks. But she was a Buddhist, and she was amazing. And so I started assigning. I found great interviews with bell hooks. I played one thing in class with bell hooks, talking about how she went to meet Thich Nhat Hanh, and she was very excited about finally meeting him. In this very little tiny talk that's on YouTube, that she says, I went to meet him, and on the way there, I had a really bad day. I was having all kinds of difficulties and experiences that were very unpleasant with people. Basically, she inferred, I think pretty much said, there were kind of racist and sexist interactions that were just like really disturbing to her on her way to go meet Thich Nhat Hanh. And then finally she meets Thich Nhat Hanh and she says, and she just says, I'm just very angry. And he says, "Oh, that's good. Take your anger. It's good, and you should appreciate your anger. Take your anger and put it in the soil, and it'll make it grow things." I sort of paraphrasing in some way, but so right. Don't kill. Don't be angry. All these things have other meanings
Mm.
and usefulnesses, and they're there for a reason. So whatever, the students took me on, taught me, and this was an example of bell hooks. And then somehow or other, I got Laurie Anderson. Laurie Anderson came into it, another interview with her.
Laurie Anderson, the
Um,
musician.
yeah, the musician and artist who's also a Buddhist. And there's this other podcast called Skeptic's Path to Enlightenment by, what is his name? It's an interesting podcast series where he interviewed Laurie Anderson, and that was wonderful. So the students really appreciated that one too. So I designed things like this. It's Scott Snibby, I think is how you pronounce his name, A Skeptic's Path to Enlightenment. But so I'd assign these kind of things, and then they'd write about them, and it would be very interesting for me to see like what they got out of these things and what they're still. A lot of it, I urged them to tell me what they're confused about. So they were still very confused all through the semester, still like you know settling on some things, but other things are very still they have to work on. They see this,
Mm.
and so like how to deal with desires. This whole business of Buddhism seems to tell you that the path, the Four Noble Truths are like we have this problem with dukkha, and the problem is due to our sometimes it's stated our desires, and the way to get rid of it is to get rid of our desires, and then there's the eightfold path to how to do that. And what they really had trouble with is what does it mean? We're not supposed to desire anything. And so I really had to work on that myself, and figure out like what. No, absolutely not. When we're hungry, we need our body's telling us we need food, or we need sleep, or we need to see somebody, or there's lots of desires. There's nothing wrong with desires. What's the problem is like cravings or hanging on to stuff and not letting it go, or wanting something else to be other than what really is. So how to get that across that I think that's why Buddhism has a bit of a bad it's harder for it to take hold because it's got this overview of there's life is suffering and you have to get rid of desire, and like somehow both of those don't quite hit the mark. They don't really hit the mark at all. You have to realize that what it's saying is not you know first of all it's saying there's problems in life, but there is a you like as the Dalai Lama says, the goal of life is to be happy. you know
Mm.
that's what we're supposed to be doing, is to be happy, right?
Mm.
Buddhism is not pessimistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and desires are not something that we want to get rid of, but it's the things that when we're desiring things that don't exist, or we're desiring something other than what is, it's like the problem. Wanting something is not a problem at all. It's what happens when you do get it that can be a problem, or what happens when you don't get it, when you don't get what you're desiring. So anyway, these are the kind of issues that I realize, oh, they're having trouble with this, and I see why, because it's difficult.
Mm. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But I'm
Indeed.
not sure what you wanted more about the. Did you want me to say more about the syllabus? I kind of went rambling there.
If you want.
No, I mean, pretty much it will be, I guess, available if people want to peruse it. It ends with examples of assignments of like things that I had them read and, say, write a little something about it. And I
Yeah.
called it a journal. So each of them wrote a journal, and every week they would make a contribution in their journal. At the end of the semester, they all sent me their complete journals. And it was very interesting to reread these things, not just as I did every week. And I tried to, one of the hard things for me was reading their paragraphs and then figuring out what in the world to say back. I could say, "Oh, thank you," or there were things I could see them being mixed up on that they have to just go through. So, I had to figure out how to say something that would be helpful in some way, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't always at all obvious how to best do that.
Hmm.
And you are somebody that I kept thinking about as somebody that says helpful things to people in a way that's, not right up in your face telling you you should behave differently or you should do, but more like accepting of everything and the different paths that everybody's on, the sort of things that I've heard you say, over and over again in a way in your interviews, which I've enjoyed listening to many of your, podcasts.
Ah,
So you've been like my teacher, David, even though this is the first time we're meeting, but I
is that
feel
right?
like I've been learning from you for sure.
Oh, that's really interesting to hear because uh, I'm usually uh, either alone here at home or with our housekeepers or gardeners or drivers. And I probably spend more time speaking Indonesian than English. Uh, and I, you're talking about the class being there. I thought, oh, it must be nice to be with people
Yeah.
who,
Well, you are teaching a class. You have a big audience. You're not getting the benefit of having being in the same space and breathing the same air. And there is something
yeah,
special to that, but
yeah,
you certainly you're reaching more people.
yeah. I really love the people here, though. I mean, that is, um, I really like being with them and around them, uh, and well, anyway, um, but that's
Yeah.
very interesting for you to say because I don't think about that. I don't have that sort of identity, you know. Uh,
I know. I know. I've noticed that in reading Crooked Cucumber that you kind of seemed like from your own description, you kind of balked at the idea of becoming a Buddhist teacher. But I see you. I listened recently was listening to your interview, your reading of the old interview from 1995 with Betty Warren, and that was wonderful. And just you and her, to me, it seemed like there's a similarity there that you took Shinryu Suzuki's. Uh, what you got from him is somehow the you know path to take on your own. That um, he inspired you to be. I don't know. I'm not sure. I feel funny putting words into your mouth or what you're thinking, but what I feel like I'm learning from both of you
hmm.
is that Shunryu Suzuki was saying, be yourself,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
go on your own path. And I feel like you manifest that, and so did Betty Warren. And I ended up reading her biography too, which is wonderful. It's also pointed to in puke.com, and it's an amazing thing. There's a lot of great stuff in there.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. She
Boy,
was
she's a person I wish I had met, and I could have, even though she's now passed away in 2006, but I didn't know about her at the time, but I kind of wish I did.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I love Betty. She was really something. You mentioned Hokyoji. Uh,
Yeah,
did you ever meet Katagiri?
I was there right after Katagiri. So
Uh huh.
Shohaku Okamura was the head teacher, and Katagiri, there was already a stupa there for Katagiri.
Uh huh. Uh huh.
He
Oh
had
well.
he
All
had
right. Now Shohaku, you're in Indiana. That's where he is. Uh,
yes,
uh, I have a great deal of respect for Shohaku Okamura.
yeah, yeah, he's amazing. He's amazing. Certainly got it. That was my first session, and it was him leading it,
Hmm.
and it was, I got a lot out of it. He's really very much of a kind of scholar of Buddhism, right? He goes right into the taking texts apart and delving into all the nuances of the resonances with different other texts. And I remember him talking about Indra's net and various other things, that
Hmm.
really were influential to me. Like we're
Mm.
all in part of there's net. It's like a fishing net with the knots. We're all like the knots in this net, and the knots don't exist on their own. There's no knot on its own. The knots are all just interconnections between other knots.
Yes.
We're
Yes.
all, when you move one knot, the whole net vibrates. And
Yeah.
when anything happens in the net, we all feel it. So yeah, so
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was still pretty early in Hokioji. I gather that now I haven't been there. This was like 30 years ago, and we were still camping out in tents and stuff. They had a Zendo that was very nice, but the living thing was just bring your own tent.
Huh.
So I spent a session, s-
Is
camping out
it
in a tent. And
is it still going? I can't remember.
yes, yes, Hokioji exists, and they still have various practice periods and sessions and things there. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. 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 I have to be reminded of a lot. Ah.
Well, yeah,
And
there's so
that's
many
great.
Buddhist things.
You've been at Green Gulch recently. That's wonderful. Yeah, I love
Oh, so
Green
I
Gulch.
really love that place. It's just paradise. I mean, my wife and I have been going there for years, just as on the Sundays when they have, outsiders could come and meditate and listen to a Dharma talk. And we walk down through the gardens and go to the Muir Beach. And we've just loved doing that over the years. And then there was a point a couple of years ago where I think it was for our aunt, no, maybe it was for her birthday that I realized they were taking guests now. So I got us like 3 nights as guests there.
Mm.
And that was just wonderful. And I ended up just saying, I just volunteered myself in the kitchen. I just talked to the Tenzo and said, "Hey, can I help cut vegetables?" And she
Yeah.
was like, "Yeah, sure." And then
Yeah.
I just got the bug. I just said, "I have to come be here." So I ended up arranging to come there for 3 weeks. And the third week was the Rohatsu Seishin, and it was not this past December, but December before that. And yeah, with uh, Jiryu,
Oh
Mark.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Jiryu was heading it.
Yeah. He's the
And
abbot.
Sarah, Steph Blank was the um, Susho
Shuso.
and Shuso, yeah. Uh, and she was amazing. She
Hmm.
just she ended up saying some things at certain points in the session that were just like wonderful bombshells of just greatness. It was fantastic having her in that
Hmm.
space. And we ended up corresponding and having some more, we're keeping in contact a bit.
Yeah. Now,
So
you,
yeah,
you so did you first got interested in Buddhism, practice meditation, or your weight seeking mind path and everything? Uh, does it? You talked about reading the Wang Po book at Bennington College,
yeah.
and can you trace your weight seeking mind story back further than that?
It's a little fuzzy. It was the biggest point I can remember back for sure was that religious experience class at Bennington College. But I know that I was reading things before that, like William Blake and stuff, and I
Hmm.
think that Tao Te Ching. I was always interested in sort of people that. Oh, what was a book about? Like Sufis and stuff. I was reading things, just all that kind of stuff, like what's going on here,
Yeah.
or the Gospel of Thomas. I don't think it was till later that I didn't discover the Gospel of Thomas, but just there are people that have figured some things out about this interesting predicament that we're in, and what did they figure out? What can I get from, how do we get? I guess I've always felt like I really not only wanted to um, somehow delve as deeply as I could with that stuff, but wanted to, it's evolved to, wanting to help people. What am I here for? What am I here for? I mean, what are any of us here for, right? We can do things, we can make stuff. I've been a scientist, I publish papers. All of that is wonderful. I've taught students, I've enjoyed teaching, I love teaching. I mean, all of it is part of the same thing,
Yeah.
but uh, we're here to even the worst people in the world. That's one thing I kind of realize. Like even the people, I won't even mention names, but people that maybe we all jointly despise, uh, they also, when you really look at their activities, they actually, as deluded as they might be, they're putting tremendous effort into their life to to make an impact of some sort. We're
Hmm.
all basically have that in common, that we're trying hard to put ourselves to do something. To some maybe people have a tremendously diluted views about what they're trying to do, and they're trying to do exactly the opposite of what it is that's going to actually help them and everything, and they create more problems for themselves and others than they solve. But nevertheless, they're putting huge energy in to they feel we all are driven internally to participate in this process. And we most of us, all of us, do it in diluted ways, a
Hmm.
lot of the
Hmm.
time,
Hmm.
right? A lot of the time. And
Mm.
so that's a theme that I guess I've been wanting to struggle with, I've been struggling with for all those years. And it just slowly grew, and it took many years because my first exposure to reading was probably 20 years or more before I started meditating. And I never really thought that meditation was the thing I had to do.
Hmm.
I thought reading and understanding, I was going to understand this stuff. I was just going to absorb it intellectually and get the idea. Remind me very much of a student in my class just now who was this brilliant guy, but he was all that. He was like very smart and he just wanted to understand. And he was very frustrated. He liked certain talks because they seemed to him very logical and they made sense. Like
Yeah.
Nicole Bodden gave a talk that I assigned to them to see, and he liked that because it had a logical thread to it and it made sense and he understood it. And then Shinryo Suzuki and other things that I would say and read, and they would be self-contradictory all the time. And he was very frustrated with this. It's like, I don't get it. I want to understand Buddhism, but it keeps contradicting itself. You say one thing and then you say the opposite. And
That's
I'd say,
right.
yes. I'd say, yes. Now you're getting somewhere. But he even told me one time we met outside of class once and I saw him and I said, hey, I won't say his name. I don't want to use people's names, but I said, it's good to see you. How you doing? And he was already telling me his frustrations. He was very honest and kind of brutally honest about himself in his write-ups that he'd send me. He'd tell me all the things he's struggling with. He was struggling with a lot in his life and unsatisfied, had a lot of dukkha going on in his life, but he really wanted to figure things out. And then, he told me something like in the class when I met, he told me, you seem to me like a very mysterious person. He told me, I told him, you seem to me like a very mysterious person.
Mm.
We're both
Mm.
mysterious to each other.
Mm.
Yeah. So I've been just doing this, and more and more, I guess, where I am now is that one signpost that we actually have is that when we do things that are diluted, we know it because the consequences are not fun, you know. And when we do things, when we behave in ways that are more consistent with the way the world is actually structured, there's a joyfulness that comes from that. You know, when we abandon this, our false artificial self idea and all of its baggage, we suddenly are liberated, you know, to just be it every minute, all those kind of things. So in a way, who knows what, there's no guidebook to this business, but the one thing I think we have to hang on to is like my current way of thinking, and maybe, that's evolving as it always is, but it's just that we can tell from the consequences of how we feel whether we're on the path that we should be on.
Mm.
We're all
Mm.
getting confused all the time. But, when we do things that are behave towards each other or towards ourselves in ways that are deeply deluded and trying to, insecurities and which we all have, and trying to either reprimand ourselves for not being good enough or self-aggrandize ourselves, all those things cause great pain. And when we let go of that stuff, there's a very good feeling associated with that. So I don't know. That's kind of where I am.
Hmm. Hmm. I want to ask you about your name. It's very interesting. Dor is,
Yeah,
and then Ben Amotz, son of
right.
Amotz. Who? Tell me about your name.
Okay. I would have had a different name if my father hadn't changed his name. He was born in Poland pre-World War II, escaped, well, was in the Zionist era where there was kind of Zionist Jews sort of soliciting children to go to Israel, to go to Palestine. And he was enamored with that idea and basically pestered his family enough. There's a lot more to that story, but he basically got them to agree to let him go. And he went to Palestine. And then that's the last he saw of my grandparents and my aunt and uncle. You know, they were, murdered by the Nazis, so but he went to Israel and basically almost like many people in his generation in Israel, the founding generation of Israel, they sort of were remaking the country, creating a new country, creating new identities for themselves. And so many of them adopted new names. So his last name was Tellemzager. My last name would have been Tellemzager.
Wow.
But he adopted the name Ben Amotz, which is kind of a Israeli sounding name. So that's where that name came from. And then my first name, Dor, came from somebody that he admired greatly, who was a little older than him, was very brilliant artistically, a writer, and wanted to be a future director. And he was sort of the mentor of my father. And his last name was Bendor. And he named me after him. And he was killed during the 1948. So, I got that name for that reason. Dor Ben Amotz.
Hmm.
And my mother, okay, just to fill circle, my mother, who was a Californian from the Bay Area, not Jewish, and went to Bennington College, the same college where I just taught this Buddhism class. So she was a graduate of that college. It's 700 students now. It was 500 when she went there in the late 40s. And then she was in New York working as an editor at the Hudson Review, and she met my father, and like they got married within a week. It's crazy. She was crazy,
Wow.
uh, in a good way. I mean, she was willing to take huge leaps in her life,
That's a
and
huge leap. Marrying somebody a week
that was a
after you
huge
meet him.
leap. And it was a huge adventure and a huge leap, and that's how I came about.
Hmm. Hmm. And
Yeah,
where did you grow up?
I grew up. I was born in Jerusalem, and
Oh,
I grew up until 10 years old. I was in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and Jerusalem.
oh,
I remember
goodness.
asking my mother once when I was very young in Jerusalem. I said, "Where is the center of the world?" And she said, "It's funny you should ask that because a lot of people say it's right here." That's what she told me. But she explained it as like in ancient times that Jerusalem was like a crossroads between the East, the Far East, and Europe and everything. Everybody went through Jerusalem. So like Jerusalem was a crossroads of everybody. So I was there until 10 years old, and then they got divorced. She left him. I won't go into all the sordid details, but it was probably a very good idea that she did. And whatever, she took me on a different path. By me and my brother and sister uh, moved back to California. So I grew up in the Bay Area after that, Berkeley,
Oh, so when
in
you
the
were 10,
60s.
you were in Berkeley.
I was in Berkeley in the 60s.
Uh-huh.
I am now
And what year
70
were
in
you born?
1960. I was born in 54. So
Uh-huh.
at 10 years old, 1964, I was in Berkeley, California, and it was just after, Kennedy was assassinated. I remember Kennedy's assassination when I was in Israel. I remember that as clear as day. I mean, the day that happened is seared in my mind too because of the impact it had on my mother.
Yeah.
But anyway, so then I came to Berkeley, California, and they still had, black ribbons around the flags in the classroom from Kennedy being assassinated. And then Johnson was elected. That's when I arrived in Berkeley, California. And then the anti-war movement and the free speech movement and all that stuff. And I was in Berkeley, California. And my mother was a graduate student at Berkeley. So I was kind of right in the thick of that.
Hmm.
in the middle of all those things, I would meet her sometimes and get tear gassed, because of all the stuff going on in campus. And what's crazy to me now is that, well, I was like a little later, I was a junior in high school in 1971. So I theoretically could have overlapped with Shinya Suzuki, but I was a kid
Yeah.
and I was a junior in high school, the year he died, and he was right across the bay. And I even remember sometime in high school, we would meet some friends of mine. We're going to San Francisco, and we go to Tasahara Bakery. You know, I
Ah.
mean, I met some, just barely, right? I kind of overlapped with some people
Hmm.
in the 60s from the Zen Center,
Huh.
just barely.
Huh.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to Tassajara?
No, but I would love to. I've been to the San Francisco Zen Center, and I've spent quite a bit of time at Green Gulch, and yeah, you'll see what, the future holds.
Yeah. Well, they always want people for the guest season. Well, they don't really have a guest season anymore, but I think they're having.
Yeah,
Well, after COVID, they just couldn't get staff
yeah,
because COVID just changed everything. Uh,
yeah, I know
it,
that. Yeah, and maybe they're working back towards. I mean, I would love to go there as a sort of whatever they call it, a student or a worker for a few years to the extent that I'm physically able. I know the work there can be very tough.
well, it
And
depends on what
actually,
you're
I won't go into
doing.
the boring details. What?
Depends on what you're doing. You'd be more likely to go there for a 2 week um workshop or practice session with some
Yeah,
teacher or
practice
something.
period, or maybe do some things working in the kitchen or whatever. I would love to go, and I'm looking forward to your book about Tassahar's stories.
Yeah, it's the first volume of three.
Really,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So
Well, it's so great, David, how you've been keeping Shunryu Suzuki. To me, it feels like Shunryu Suzuki is about as close to being alive as you could imagine because of what you're doing. Because like you keep releasing these new things. I mean, like talks. It's like, oh, it's a new talk by Shunryu Suzuki. Here it is. I feel like I can be discovering new stuff about Shunryu Suzuki because of what you're doing.
yeah, well, but other people do. I mean, there's a lot that comes out of the San Francisco Zen Center, and Engaged
Oh
Wisdom's
yeah,
got a
yeah, yeah.
lot, and
No, no, for sure, for
and
sure.
and
Of
other
course, of course.
other you know up from other groups in his lineage. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. No, no, of course, of course. There are many people that, have been influenced by him and they're all carrying on in whatever way they can. But it really is a very special thing you're doing. I'm not just trying to, it's just true, David. It just is.
mm,
What you're doing is bringing this stuff to life in a way that is quite unique and
mm.
uh and amazing to have it. And then it's just going on. There's 3 volumes coming of Tasahara stories. It's like second best to being there, in those days, right? I can't go back and be there in those days, but I can help live with you. You help us all live through it in a certain way
Yeah, well, it was really different back
and learn
then.
the lessons. Learn the lessons, right? That's really why everybody's interested. I imagine. Why is in my beginner's mind so popular with so many different people? Because there's something that he's teaching that everybody wants. It's like you just feel like, this is food. This food is good. This food tastes good. I want more
Mm,
of this food. It's good
mm.
for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So you're offering these good foods for all of us.
yeah. Well, oh, just in terms of as in my beginner's mind, one thing the book does, it's not just about Tassar at all. It really shows you how the haiku zendo came about, and the book came about, and how uh, Tassar bread book came about. There's
Right.
um, because it's a lot of it's just memoir about me. Uh,
Yeah, but all your books that I've read, not all of them, but I did read Thank You and Okay. And they all are great. You know, you are a great teacher, you know. You teach in this very wonderful way. And Crooked Cucumber, yeah, it's a biography of Shimura Suzuki, but boy, was it a useful lesson in many dimensions.
Huh. Well, that's good to hear.
You know this. It is. I mean, it certainly is. It was for me, and I just there's no doubt that anybody reading it is going to have, you know, everybody's at a different place in their life, and sometimes there's just something you're not ready to hear yet. You know, it's like reading
Hmm.
some of Shunra Suzuki's, you know, Zen My Beginner's Mind chapters that sometimes, you know, I've had the experience of listening to one of those, like in my old Zen group, and it's like, I don't know what he's talking about. I don't get this, you know. But he even said sometimes, if you, if what I'm saying doesn't make sense to you, just forget about it. You know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. What I mean, he'll say stuff exactly like that, you know, or even if it does matter to you, you should forget it right away. You know, you should forget it right away because it's not about hanging on to it. And it's not about feeling like, oh, geez, I'm ignorant. I don't know anything because I don't understand what he's talking about. Like, if it resonates with you and you'll feel it. He
Yeah.
doesn't say that, but that's how I feel about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. I want to say one other thing about Tassajara. I want to make it clear to the listening public. If you wanted to go there and work in the kitchen, uh, like be on staff, uh, uh, then that's to me that's the way to go. It's very expensive to go there and be in a workshop or one of
Yeah,
these two-week
right. I
things.
understand that.
It's it was $1.50 when we started to come there for a day. it's
Yeah.
a it can be 100 times that now.
Yeah, right. It used to be in the old days like it was $2 a day to be go there and be a guest worker, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
$2. A dollar and a half. I
yeah,
think if somebody was there for like the whole practice period or something, wait, right at the first, and like $1.50. One of the big differences I think about back then and now is money was much much more evenly distributed, and we could live
uh-huh.
much cheaper. Uh, the way the way it has evolved to be, it's so hard to get by to now that I really feel for young people trying to figure out what to do
Yeah,
now, because it
right.
wasn't that hard back then, right? I mean,
Yeah, like Betty Warren on her teacher's salary, you know, not only living comfortably but kind of supporting the Zen Center, right?
yeah, she bought a home in Sausalito.
Yeah, and she gave, you know, donated to help to buy food at the Zen Center and everything. It
Right.
was
She's helping to
a big,
support the Zen Center. She bought a home in Sausalito. She's a school teacher. Um,
yeah. I
and
know that doesn't happen anymore. It can't, and financially.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and that's uh, well, I do not think I will get into why I think that has happened. Um, uh, but it's not, society doesn't have to structure itself that way. But anyway,
yeah,
it seems to me that money is like uh, almost like a form of life that wants to grow and expand, and
yeah.
has been and people basically serve it.
Yeah, right. Well, it's a manifestation of a certain kind of delusion that we have that, you know, money is somehow going to buy us what we want, you know, and it's got a life of its own and it's running a bit out of control and it's all our doing in some way. We all ask for this, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
in some
Mm,
level. But you know, there
indeed.
are a lot of things like going to Tassajara or going to Green Gulch. I mean, you can be a guest there and you pay, and I did that. But really, you know, people should know if they're inclined to go and be like a guest student at Tassajara. I mean, at Green Gulch,
Green Gulch, yeah.
it's not very, you do pay a little bit, but it's room and board included. You know, you pay a little bit and you basically live in this wonderful place. and get to meditate and it's just a great, fantastic experience. And Tassajara is the same. My understanding is now you have to kind of do something at Green Gulch or at San Francisco Zen Center before you can be candidate for going to do the same thing at Tassajara.
Except at the very first, it was always that way.
Yeah, but they also, they're, I often get emails now where they're looking for people to, no money involved. They're looking for people to work in the kitchen, or they're
That's
looking for
right.
people to
That's right.
be as, it's just do work period in the spring or whatever. So, even though the world is difficult to navigate financially, there are things like that that are there still, and they are fantastic things. And, Tassajara and Green Gulch are examples.
I wouldn't. I'd want to be staff. I wouldn't want to be there working less to study Buddhism.
Yeah, right. No,
You
I mean,
know?
it's exactly. That's how I felt when we were guests at Green Gulch. I felt like, well, the real experience I want to have here is I want to be in there cutting the carrots.
You're right.
I mean, that's the real thing. Let's do
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Well, we used to have a thing we'd call guest students, and that the
Yeah, it
term
still
guest
has.
students
Yeah,
it's been used in different ways in the
yeah.
different centers, but it was people who would pay a good amount to be a Tata or a guest. When would it be? I guess they'd be a student in the morning and then a guest in the afternoon.
Oh, I don't know how they do that at Tassajara, but I think I was called a guest student for 2 weeks at Green Gulch,
Yeah.
and I paid something. It was, I forget, it was like 25 bucks, 35 bucks or something a day to be a student there. And you get well fed and you wonderful experience. And I did work and was a great experience. And then the third week I was in the Rahatsu Seishin, which I did pay for,
Uh
but if I had been I guess members of San Francisco Zen Center, if they accumulate whatever, they have some point system where you can participate in sessions, and it isn't financially overburdening. I mean, it was not a problem for me to pay to be in the Rahatsu
right.
Session, and I was happy to do it. But there are ways to get involved in that also without being financially well
Right.
off.
How much did the
Yeah,
session cost?
I don't remember, but it was some hundreds.
Well,
Considering
guess,
it's seven
estimate.
days of an it wasn't like overly expensive, but it was, not cheap either.
Give me a
I just don't
figure.
remember the number.
Give me a figure.
What?
Give me a
It was
figure.
hundreds of dollars, but I just don't remember which hundreds. It's
Like
all on the website, though,
like 500 or
something like that. I really honestly don't remember the
yeah.
exact number,
Yeah.
but
I
it
mean
was, you get a room and you can choose to be in a room with a double room where you're sharing it with somebody else, and then it's a bit less expensive, or you can have a single room in the guest house.
uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh.
And in
Hey,
the
I
in the
had a
first 2 weeks
dream.
I was there
I
when
had
I
a
was there as a guest student, I was sharing a room with another guest student, and
uh-huh.
that was fine and great. And then, during the session, I opted to be in a single room at the guest house, which was also wonderful. And
Yeah,
so,
I can understand that.
yeah,
I had a dream just the other night that
yeah,
it was sort of one of these sort of quasi Zen center dreams, and somebody uh, who I knew was getting married. So there was going to be a wedding. It was like at a sort of Green Gulch type place. But uh, then he was very upset because they were charging everybody to go to the wedding and for the food, and and then all these people were leaving the wedding, and I said, well, I have some money, I'll pay for some of you to go, and so I paid for. I remember I paid for these four guys to be able to eat the lunch and go to the wedding. There were just two of them, and I said, hey, where's the other two? Said, oh, well, they decided not to go anyway. I said, well, hey, I give you money for four. But anyway, that was my dream. But
oh
I know
man,
it's hard for a Zen Center has to figure out how to keep going, and like in and everything is so expensive in America, and in Asia, you know, temples are they have thousands, hundreds and thousands of years of history for support. You know,
Yeah,
so things in if you go to a temple or you go to an ashram or something in India, the thought of paying anything is uh, really you know uh,
yeah.
you don't pay to go to a place like that. But America's really got a problem with how much things cost.
I guess a mark of the culture's appreciation of those things and valuing those things. And here, value is always money, and
Yeah,
anything worth something has to be expensive. And it's just like it taints everything in a way. Even though what is it? It's really nothing. It's just this piece of paper, but it disassociates us from each other in many ways. And well, it's just a manifestation of our culture's you know
yeah, yeah,
hole that we've dug ourselves in.
yeah, yeah. That's true. Well, on the other hand, here it's expensive to be a Balinese Hindu. I mean, it takes about I've read like a third of people's incomes goes to the uh, the neighborhood group and the priests, and so it's it's and that's aside from any federal tax they pay, which I imagine isn't a lot. Uh, so nothing's free anywhere. It's
Yeah.
uh, coming from something. Huh. Well, look, Dor, um,
Yes.
we've covered a lot of ground here. Would you like to say something in conclusion?
Um, yeah. Doesn't I guess one thing I've learned is that there's nothing really to say in conclusion. You know, I mean, what's it's never really done. There's always something right around the corner to be another adventure. So I don't know. This was a wonderful adventure, and I just thank you
Yeah.
um, for all the things you do. And I feel like one of the things I wanted to do when we got started talking is I wanted to kind of get more of a sense from you of how, it really was directly learning from Shinryu Suzuki, but I feel like I've absorbed as much as I can of that from just the things that you say and write and Shinryu Suzuki's writings and people like Betty Warren and but I don't know. It's probably impossible to communicate, how um, how it is that Shinryu Suzuki inspired people to go somewhere that they never, that they were looking to go, but didn't know how, right? So he had this
Mm.
magic way of doing that.
Mm.
What was that? What was that? You always ask your guests that. You always ask your guests, okay, so Buddhism is wonderful. What is it about Buddhism that's wonderful? Why do you like it? What is it about Shunryu Suzuki that you keep asking people? What is it about Shunryu Suzuki that you found interesting, that attracted you, that inspired you? So I feel like I didn't get a chance to really ask you that.
Oh, well,
That could probably be another hour of conversation, so I shouldn't bring it up now. But
what
you
was
know,
it about it?
I feel like it's hard to say. I'm sure it's very hard to put into words, right?
Well, um, it gave, you know, running into Sokoji and him and Katagiri and the practice. It wasn't just him. It was the whole thing all around, and
Yeah,
it gave my life focus, and um, I've uh, no matter how far I've strayed from it, that that focus has continued in one way or another. Uh, and yeah, I really When I first went there, I remember I thought, well, this is good. I've been looking for something, and and I wasn't really comfortable with anything else I'd found. Um, uh, and I thought, well, this is good. I like this. I'll do this. I thought, well, I'll give it a year. I'll I'll do this
Mm,
for a year without questioning it. You know,
mm,
and
yeah.
then I'll think about it. But I never, I never, uh, then I forgot about that and never
Right.
questioned it. I even, I'd be living outside of the Zen Center and people would say, "Oh, when did you leave Zen Center?" Or something. Well, I didn't leave Zen Center. I did,
Yeah.
well, it's like if you're going to if you go to a college and you go to a school and you study something, not everybody is going to be staying in the school. you know,
Right.
People will be leaving, but they'll bring
Yeah.
with them what they learned from the school. Oh yeah, Suzuki said to Bob Watkins and Sandy when they left, we didn't want them to leave. They left. They were there very soon after we bought Tassajara. They just rode in on a pickup truck, and it was snow and rain when you got lower, and uh, then they were looking very important. He was the first work leader. They were experienced and knew things, and then they left in October, and we didn't want them to leave. And
Mm,
Suzuki said to them, when they met with him before they left, he said, "Well, uh, you can leave the monastery, but the monastery won't leave you."
right.
Mm.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah. So very
And he
good.
also, I get the impression that, for you in particular, like you would do these things like stay up all, read these sutras at night and study and then not show up on time in the mornings and stuff. And the fact that he was like, you were being criticized for doing that by some people there. And he was like, no, it's okay. You're doing good stuff, you know? So it's kind of like he had this way of encouraging people to be who they are, I feel like. That's what, you know, I've learned from you and from
yeah.
Betty Warren in a way that he had this way of just telling people, go find your own path.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. He would be more strict in general, and but then he if someone strayed from that and were like really into it in a way that he could accept, and he would be very encouraging. One example is people who wanted to sit uh, a lot. He said, "Well, just sitting a couple of times a day is enough, and one or two sessions a year is enough." So we had some students decide to do 100-day session on their own, and a lot of people were like putting it down and this and that. But when Bob Walter came back from it and saw Suzuki, people, he was sort of regarded as not a real student, like too much on his own trip. But then Suzuki saw him and invited him in and was very excited. Tell me about your session, how'd it go, and this and that. And they had a very close relationship. Uh, you know, uh, and then you can have some extreme examples of that, like at Gurdjieff's group. There was a guy who was like very contrarian and would just cause a lot of trouble. And Gurdjieff said, "Where's so and so?" They said, "Well, we kicked him out." They said, "Go back and get him, bring him back." uh,
Yeah.
well, but anyway,
So
it,
it's,
it's hard to make
living
rules. Everything's sort of
right.
individual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take
Oh,
refuge in the Buddha for the benefit of all beings, all beings.
yeah. Yeah. Well, but anyway,
benefit of all beings.
uh, it's I'm very grateful for having run into uh, Shunryu Suzuki, the Zen Center, Buddhism, and all that, and also to having talked with you. It's been very interesting.
Well, thank you. It's certainly been wonderful for me to meet you this way, even though we're still electronically haven't met in person. I would love to at some point. But
Yeah,
thank you, and I look forward to whatever comes next.
yeah. Okay, hey,
Yeah.
send me a photo of you. I need I need you know, like a headshot or something, a picture of you.
Okay.
We can take it off of any other picture. We can be part of it, but we can take it out. But for
I'll
the
send you one.
and send me one from when you were younger.
Okay. Send you two photos. I'll try to find two photos. Okay.
Yeah, the one the current one is I need soon, right away. The one that's
Okay.
younger we put uh, in the on kook.com on the podcast page. We have a now
Okay.
and then photo.
Great, David. I will do that. And thank you. I'm glad this worked out.
Okay, well, you take
Thank
care.
you. Thank you very much. And Gacho, and to you, you can't see me, but I'm saying thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, you take care. All right. Bye
Okay.
bye.
You too. Thank you.
This has been a Cuke Audio Podcast. I'm DC Puba of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Sonora with Doggett Bandita, Feline Manis, guest Doggett Boombo, and dear lovely Katrinka, who's in Oregon with her son and family, but she's with us in spirit, and we're all wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.